Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into what is honestly a massive regulatory earthquake in the pharmaceutical world. We're looking at a brand new set of rules that are completely changing how drugs get from a lab testing phase all the way to your local pharmacy. It's a wildly fascinating topic, essentially reshaping drug governance and liability reform from the ground up. So if you've ever found yourself wondering why the healthcare system moves at the incredibly slow speed it does, well, you are definitely in the right place.
Right off the bat, think about this. What actually happens when you speed up drug launches, but at the exact same time, you loosen the rules on pricing? That is the ultimate trade-off we're going to be exploring today. Because, we all want faster access to breakthrough life-saving medications, right? Of course we do. But what's the catch if the financial guardrails and the legal liabilities are adjusted just to make that speed a reality? That delicate balancing act is at the very heart of today's policy breakdown.
To make sense of all this, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the drug launch bottleneck. Second, slashing regulatory red tape. Third, rethinking pricing and liability. And finally, we'll wrap up with the consumer impact.
Let's jump right into Section 1, the drug launch bottleneck.
I really want to ground this abstract policy stuff in a reality that we all know. We've all either experienced or at least heard about that agonizing wait for new, innovative treatments to finally hit the market. Sometimes it can take up to a decade just to clear the paperwork. So why does it take so long for a new drug to reach your pharmacy? Historically speaking, the delay isn't just about the complex science or the lab testing or even the clinical trials, as incredibly difficult as those things are. Fundamentally, it's been about the towering wall of bureaucracy that follows the science. Even after a drug is scientifically proven to be totally safe and effective, it still has to survive a system that was originally designed with such intense caution, it inherently creates this massive, frustrating waiting game for patients who desperately need those medications.
Under the old rules, getting a drug out there was literally a multi-layered marathon. Step 1 involves navigating initial regulatory filings. Essentially, drug companies have to prove every single minute detail of the drug's creation, its safety profile, and its intended use to a whole bunch of different government agencies. Then, if they somehow survive that, in Step 2, manufacturers hit these complex governance hurdles. This is where multiple committees review the data, which often results in months or sometimes literally years of prolonged back and forths. Finally, we get to Step 3, finalizing pricing and launch approvals. And historically, this was never just a quick rubber stamp. It was a heavily scrutinized, super strict process to ensure market prices met specific regulatory limits before even a single pill could legally be sold. It was, quite frankly, red tape wrapped in more red tape.
Which brings us nicely to Section 2, slashing regulatory red tape.
This is exactly where the new policies we're examining step in. They're being pitched as the proposed solution to finally clear out that historical traffic jam. Look at the contrast. Under the old rules, the absolute priority was strict governance and oversight, and that undeniably and really by design led to a much slower market entry. But under the new rules, the regulatory speed limit is getting raised. The focus shifts entirely to simplified launches and a streamlined market entry. By intentionally cutting down on all those duplicate filings and endless committee reviews we just talked about, manufacturers are now empowered to move their finalized, safe products onto pharmacy shelves at a significantly faster and much more efficient pace.
Our source material highlights a really core directive here. New rules simplify drug launches. For pharmaceutical companies, this is huge. They've long argued that excessive administrative burdens don't actually make drugs any safer. They just delay access to essential treatments. So, simplifying these launches means manufacturers can, at least theoretically, redirect their time, their energy, and their resources away from fighting bureaucracy and toward actually producing and distributing the medicines that people desperately need.
Now, I know what you're thinking. It sounds like a total win, right? Faster medicine for everyone, way less paperwork. But at what cost? Because as we all know when it comes to governance, gaining speed usually means making a compromise somewhere else.
Let's unpack that compromise in Section 3, rethinking pricing and liability.
To really understand the exact financial trade-offs woven directly into these new, faster regulations, we have to look at a concept called liability for overcharging. In plain English, this is the financial and legal risk a manufacturer faces if they price a drug higher than the strict regulatory limits set by the government. Under the old system of really strict governance, if a company pushed their prices beyond what was deemed acceptable, they could be hit with severe financial penalties, lawsuits, and heavy legal action. It was this persistent threat designed to act as a strict, hard ceiling on your pharmacy bill.
But here is the absolute kicker from our source material. The new rules actually reduce manufacturer liability for overcharging. So, While the launch pathways are cleared of red tape to make market entry way faster and easier, the intense financial penalties for pricing a drug too high are simultaneously being loosened. The government is essentially granting pharmaceutical manufacturers more flexibility, not just in how quickly they can operate, but in how strictly they are financially policed on their pricing strategies once that drug is actually on the market.
So, what does this all mean for us? That's Section 4, the consumer impact.
When all is said and done, how do these sweeping, bureaucratic, and financial changes actually affect what happens when you or a loved one walks up to the pharmacy counter? Well, we're looking at a classic policy of give and take. On the plus side, we absolutely have faster access to new medications, made possible by drastically reduced red tape for pharmaceutical manufacturers. That is a clear, tangible, and potentially life-saving benefit for anyone waiting on a new treatment. However, paired directly with that benefit is the decreased financial penalties for overcharging. By easing up on this legal liability, there are very real potential shifts in consumer pricing dynamics. Without those old strict penalties hanging over their heads, will manufacturers push prices higher? Or will the streamlined, cheaper launch process actually keep costs down naturally? Honestly, that is the profound unknown right at the absolute center of these new rules.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty critical question to ponder today. Will faster access to medicine actually outweigh the risks of reduced pricing liability? Are we, as consumers, willing to accept potentially less aggressive price controls if it means we get groundbreaking medical innovations in our hands months or even years earlier? It's a fascinating structural shift in healthcare, and understanding this very delicate balance is key to understanding the future of drug accessibility and equity. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this helped clear things up. As always, keep learning and keep asking questions.